Well, good evening, IFL Nation, and welcome to tonight's stream. We are once again on the road, live from the Fun City Adventure Park in Walpole, Massachusetts. It is 7 p.m. over here on the East Coast, which means it's time for another volume of Wager Wednesday in the Indoor Football League. Thank you so much for tuning in, taking some time out of your busy Wednesday afternoon or evening to come and talk some shop about the greatest indoor football league that there is. For those of you who are new to the Indoor Football League or new to this channel in general and just stumbling upon it for the first time, I want to warmly welcome you aboard. My name is Alex Schuberth. I am a huge fan of the indoor and arena football game. That is a passion that I have channeled into my current role as lead IFL contributor for a sports forum site called Sports Coast to Coast, which is a Pacific Northwest-based sports forum site which specializes specifically in the coverage of the Indoor Football League and its 14-member teams. Each week, our staff brings you pretty much everything that you need to know. Updated schedules, updated rosters, weekly game previews, along with recaps, along with other great analysis of this amazing league. So if you call yourself a fan of the IFL, Sports Coast to Coast is a must-go-to to truly enhance your fandom. I've linked the URL below in the description for you to check out at your leisure. It is there where you will also find the written version of my Wager Wednesday piece, which I published out there earlier this morning. So if the video thing isn't exactly for you, you've got the nice screen or pen to paper, however you like to interpret it, to take in your dose of IFL previews from a numbers lens. So with that being said, we are once again operating on just one screen today. But we will mosey on over to our presentation bit here. Once I actually track down where it is. Give me 1 second here. There we go. Not sure why that window wasn't showing for the first time, but we do have it there. Just one more push of the button here, and we will be pretty much all set. There we go. We finally did it. We got there. Appreciate the patience. So we are at week 12 of the 2026 season. 11 games down, 9 weeks remaining in the regular season as teams try to state their case as legitimate contenders or just to have a seat at the table at the 8-team playoff field. So without further ado, let's hop right into it. We'll start things off by recapping week 11, which featured a pair of mall games as part of the IFL's Indoor Football League Cup tournament out in East Rutherford, New Jersey at American Dream. So we have those couple games. We had a few games on Friday and Saturday this week as well. So we'll take a look at each of those in detail. Add those 5 games to our season-wide population so far. We'll talk about some of the defining trends that we've seen this season from both a team standpoint and a league standpoint. Everything that you would want to know along the betting front, from straights, parlays, money line spreads, and totals. We'll talk a little about the Mortal Mega Max as well, and maybe some adjustment I'm going to be making to that moving forward. But we finally have no more perfect streaks in the IFL after Week 11's play, with Orlando, New Mexico going under its preset point total. The Orlando Pirates have cashed their first under of the season after each of their first 7 made the over. So once we reflect on everything from Week 11 and prior, we'll jump right in. We've got a full slate of 7 games, all 14 teams in action throughout Week 12. 1 game Friday, 4 Saturday, and a doubleheader on Sunday. We'll talk about each game, make our picks, and then put together a 3-leg parlay to hopefully keep our strong momentum going there. So spoiler alert, we did some pretty fancy things last week. All right, so the week began with the Jacksonville Sharks hitting the road, looking to extend their winning streak to 6 games with a date against the Iowa Barnstormers at Casey Center. Fascinating game for James Cahoon, who spent his rookie season as Iowa starting quarterback, now battling against the Barnstormers for the first time as a rival. And true to vintage revenge game form, Cahoon was electric in this game. Marquel Wade and Jaden Stoshak had outstanding games, as did Jimmy Robinson, who had a few touchdown runs throughout the course of the game. But Iowa, they were no slouch either. They actually put up their best offensive game of the season with Clifton McDowell, who became the 4th different signal caller to draw a start for the Iowa Barnstormers this season. McDowell, impressive against Jacksonville's stout defense, throwing for 2 touchdowns, rushing for 4 more, as aside from a bit of a slow start in the first quarter, Iowa was pretty much going toe-to-toe with these guys. Unfortunately for the hosts, by the time they did find their stride, they were already down by a couple scores, and that is where the end result of this game would fall. Jacksonville does get the winning streak to a half a dozen. They beat Iowa 60-48. It is the second consecutive 60-point onslaught put on by the Sharks, and with the game totaling 108 points, our underbet, unfortunately, did not go our way. So, believe it or not, that was actually our first Friday main game pick of the season to lose on our 6th try. So, all good things must come to an end, I suppose. We make our way to Saturday's game with the Tulsa Oilers taking on the San Antonio Gunslingers. This was the earlier of the 2 games on Saturday, and this one was about Tulsa getting back to their true form. They allowed an opening touchdown, but after that, they dominated the rest of the first half. Defensively, getting 4 stops in a row, including 2 interceptions. TJ Edwards in the Oiler offense running rampant from there. Rookie Caleb Ramseur with an impressive outing as well. The Oilers stage a 28-0 run in that first half to ultimately propel them to the victory and out of reach of San Antonio's offense that has really yet to find that next gear. The Oilers going on the road, defeating San Antonio by a final score of 45-30, an outcome that actually extends the Oilers' winning streak against the Gunslingers specifically to 5 games. So Tulsa still having their number against their rivals from that Red River Rumble of the IFL. We wrapped up Saturday with Northern Arizona taking the road against the San Diego Strike Force in what was Anthony Garrett's first IFL start as the quarterback of the visiting team. And unfortunately for him and the Wranglers, this one did not go well. And right from the jump, it got completely out of hand super quickly. The Wranglers were able to put up an early score, but the rest of the half, anytime San Diego had the ball, they punched it in for a touchdown. In fact, that explosive upside gave the Strike Force 51 points in the first half. They ended up leading by 37 at the half. The rest of the game was, for lack of a better term, strictly for administrative purposes. The Wranglers did outscore the Strike Force in that second half, but by 21-14 margin, where really neither team had to push extensively for the game's final 30 minutes. But in any event, San Diego dominates again. They win their 6th out of 7. Final score 67-35. We pick the under again on a game that exceeded the century mark. So our Friday and Saturday, from our predictive standpoint, very rough as can be, as a matter of fact, going 0 for 3. And then we had to pivot to Sunday's games, which those lines actually came out the morning of those 2 contests, which may have actually worked out a little bit in our favor. We will talk about the consolation game of the IFL Cup first. That featured the New Mexico Chupacabras and the Orlando Pirates, which Orlando had a lot to think about following their 73-33 loss against Vegas. I guess the coaching staff with Rod Windsor and Les Moss, they worked together. They brought in some reinforcements, especially along the defensive side of the ball, and they got exactly the result that they needed to. Another hot start that saw the Pirates score on each of their first 4 possessions. They only allow 3 points to the Chupacabras in the first 30 minutes. That gave them a 27-3 halftime lead. And pretty similar to Naz in San Diego, the second half of Orlando was pretty much just all about damage control. Aside from allowing a touchdown to Donovan Portery on the opening possession of the second half, Orlando surrendered no more from that point onwards. They didn't really have to put their foot on the gas offensively in that stretch either, adding just a couple more touchdowns to make it formal. But the Pirates claimed third place in the mini tournament with their 41-11 win over the Chupacabras. So the Pirates remain in third place in the East with a record of 5-3. Meanwhile, for New Mexico, their 5th straight loss sends them tumbling down to a record of 1-7. And last but not least, championship game, IFL Cup, the Arizona Rattlers taking on the Vegas Nighthawks, the much anticipated rematch after the prior meeting saw pretty much every bit of fireworks humanly imaginable. And this game was not much different. If you ignore the fact that there wasn't an on-field fight between coaches, this game brought about just as much of that intensity and that wave of emotion as that opening matchup in Henderson did. This game started out with Vegas getting on the board with the field goal. Arizona and Vegas trading touchdowns for much of the first half. Arizona making the first big play of the game, up by 4. They get an interception by Carson Taylor, returned for a touchdown. They follow that up with a safety. And then after another turnover, or actually it wasn't a turnover by Vegas, the succeeding possession following the safety saw the Rattlers get inside Vegas's 5-yard line, but unfortunately for Arizona, they fumbled. Vegas recovered. That proved to be pivotal as Vegas escaped with a 12-point halftime deficit. From that point on, the Vegas defense, they knew what they had to do. They understood the assignment. They locked down. They pick off Drew Powell twice in the third quarter. The offense then stages a 21-0 run to get back in the lead. Arizona tying the game with a touchdown late. Vegas getting back in front with the field goal. Arizona on a drive in the mid stages of the fourth quarter. They come up empty after a drop on 4th down. Vegas working methodically down the field, scoring a touchdown with about a minute left. Arizona's comeback effort, they did get the touchdown, but the 2-point conversion and the onside kick both ended up failing. So Vegas, after a few positive moving plays, they clinch the first ever IFL Cup. They now hold both pieces of league hardware with this 48-44 comeback win against the Arizona Rattlers. So that wrapped up our week with a 2-3 record where both of our picks that went right were favorites on the money line, which sounds a little bit iffy until you realize, you know what? Favorites were extremely good last week and in general this season, which we'll get to those numbers a little bit further down the road. But before we advance any further, want to welcome Cody onto the show tonight. Thank you so much for hopping on. Certainly glad to have you in. Any questions or any hot takes that you have, feel free to shoot in the comments, and I will do the best I can to try to address those and string them together with this piece here. So those were Week 11's games. Where do we stand right now? Well, we're at an even record, 29 wins, 29 losses, but we're still facing a pretty stiff deficit from the net profit and loss. With the flat method and weighted method, pretty much right around the same spot, give or take a handful of pocket change. We're still really struggling with our over-under betting in general, along with bets on underdogs on the spread. But if you ignore all of those, when we bet favorites, those favorites have paid in spades for us, combining for a 16-4 record when taking both the spread and the money line betting. So we have our strengths. We have our areas that I need to work on to try to bring those back up to par. So from that lens, this is going to be a very fascinating next 3, 4, 5 weeks or so to see if we can stay online with some of our preseason goals. And the last thing that I'll mention before shooting off to our next section here is Mortal Mega Max bets. I put it out in my written piece earlier this morning, but from now on, I'm going to make those a minimum odds requirement of minus 200. So that's the challenge that I'm going to be holding myself to in terms of future max bets as we hit this second half of the season. Our 3-leg parlay of the week. We had to improvise a little bit. As much as I didn't want to put it on Friday and Saturday and maybe not have that mall sweat that I wanted to. But, hey, listen, it worked out great. We started out with Iowa at plus 21.5, trusting the league-wide numbers there, as the Barnstormers keep it at a 12-point deficit against the Sharks in that 60-48 outcome. So that outcome Friday got the parlay going. We banked on the Oilers winning outright against the Gunslingers, which the Oilers won that game by 15 on the road. And then San Diego's incredible start to their game against Northern Arizona saw them cover with no difficulty at all, winning that game by 32 when they needed a margin of victory of at least 9 points. So those 3 picks in tandem got us a plus 510 winner. So after our first 7 attempts this year of a whole heck of a lot of nothing, we've now won 2 of our past 3 parlays, 8 of our last 9 legs overall. And lo and behold, we are actually ahead by 3 units from the parlay tracker. So it just goes to show you, it is an extremely volatile proposition. You will have your highs, but you will also have your lows. So if parlays are the thing for you, my only recommendation would be make sure to check your bankroll and ensure that you can withstand those lows that you may inevitably run into. Our representation of our year-to-date progress so far in terms of dollar amounts, as we stated before, the flat and the weighted method are both pretty much right at the same spot, at that minus 4.5 unit neighborhood. So again, like we say each week, we want to go upwards. We're 0-0 each week. We want to make sure that we're stringing together as many positive results as possible from this point onward. All right, so here's a look at the population of games so far. With the favorites having an incredible week this past week, going a perfect 5-0 straight up, 4-1 against the spread. It was a public bettor's dream. With that result in hand, favorites now hold a slight advantage on the spread, winning about 53% of the time. And home teams continue to be the cash cow of the IFL this season, generally speaking. On the spread, 35-19. On the money line, 34-20, above 60%, either way you slice it. And it's had that level of consistency for pretty much the entire year, give or take a couple of weeks, maybe early on. Overs have a slight advantage as well, with our first 3 games of this past week making the over, and both IFL Cup games staying under their respective totals. So, again, we still have that bit of a soft spot where, depending on that amount, whether it's 86.5 or 87.5, we do see that divide there in the efficiency that the over cashes. So at 86.5 or lower, we're looking at 58%. At 87.5 or more, we're looking at more 44%. So pretty significant shift there, where you're looking at basically 1 out of every 7 games more likely to make the over if it's at just that point higher. So Before we move on, we'll still highlight home underdogs here. They've dropped each of the last two that I've tried to back, but they're still very strong this season. 14-7 against the spread, winning twice as often as they lose. So a bit discouraging that we've had a couple losses on home underdogs recently, but if the situation is right, I would not mind going back to the well one bit, given that development. And Cody asking if my spreadsheets are available for access. I do have a bet tracker that I have online currently, alongside fellow fans Trey from Off the Wall and Cody from In the Alley. More than happy to share that with you if you want to drop me a message over at X, if that's what you're talking about. If not, let me know and I'll see what I can cobble up for you. So now we'll take a peek at some of these team-by-team trends here. Some significant ones coming to light. Vegas remaining scorching hot against the spread. They have now covered in each of their last 7 games. Green Bay very strong as well, 6-3 ATS. That includes a 4-1 mark at home. On the opposite side of the ledger, San Antonio now 2-6 against the spread, having failed to cover in each of their last 3. Quad City also on a 3-game coverless streak, as their ATS record has fallen to 3-6. From the over-under standpoint, perhaps surprisingly, Arizona and Quad City both with 3-6 records, despite their games averaging a pretty healthy point total on a per-game basis. Quad City with that 86.3 number that you see, and Arizona with that 89.4 number. So are their games perhaps being pushed too high as a result of matchups or maybe that name brand recognition? That's something that we're going to have to dial into as we get more of their games to take a preview at and dissect. On the opposite side, Orlando, despite their game going under last week, they are still the highest scoring team in terms of a matchup standpoint in the league at over 100 a game, a 7-1 over-under record. San Diego, a game back there with a 91.5 point per game average, and Fishers at 6-3 to the over with an average game around 97 a contest. So very, very fascinating trends so far. Hopefully we can extract some value out of them in the form of some correct picks. All right, and here are our yearly results by team so far. We have gotten one team to our 7-win goal already. That is the Arizona Rattlers, on the strength of perfection on our 2 over-under picks and a perfect 3-0 on picks involving the money line for them. So they have been one of our most profitable teams this season, if not the most profitable team on the season. I'll have to remind myself to add that net profit metric as a column at the end for next stream. On the opposite end, though, we've got Tulsa and Jacksonville at 2-6 for our game picks, with our spread picks on Jacksonville games and our over-under picks on Tulsa games really struggling badly at 0-3 apiece. We've also got an 0-4 with Northern Arizona over-under plays as well. So is that something that we look to try to correct course if the situation is right, or do we bear those in mind and maybe try to pivot somewhere else? All very interesting things to look at from my standpoint. As again, the goal is to bring all 14 of these teams to that 7-win mark. For Tulsa and Jacksonville, we can't bank that many more losses in our quest to do just so. All right, the lines and odds that we're going to be using today are going to come from DraftKings, and entirely DraftKings. No more Bet365 nonsense with their crummy odds there. This series is purely rooted in the philosophy of entertainment and fun. It is not meant to be construed as betting advice or a tool with which to make money. As we've seen in sports all the time, there is no such thing as a lock or a guarantee. If you do want to play, make sure you're doing so legally. You must be 21 years of age or older to play in most jurisdictions. If you would like to tail or fade my selections, you're more than welcome to do so, but please game responsibly. practice safe gambling habits. That includes setting a budget in terms of both time and money. Risk only what you can afford to lose. And if you feel like you or a loved one is having issues, maybe teetering upon problem gaming or an addiction of some kind, there are a lot of resources online and issued by individual states that provide assistance and guidance and referral in that area. I have haveagameplan.org as one example. Responsibleplay.org is another. So if you feel like things are kind of spiraling a little bit out of control with your role in the sports betting world, know that you are not alone and that help and assistance is out there. With that said, we've got our full 7-game big board to look at. Let's delay no further and bring that to the limelight here. And I will bring that screen over momentarily. Lovely. There we go. So let's hop right in here. We'll go to our first game of the docket. We'll first magnify this a little bit to make it a tad bit more visible for y'all. And here we go. First game of the week is a standalone Friday contest. We've got the San Antonio Gunslingers on the road taking on the Green Bay Blizzard for what I believe is the very first time in the franchise's histories. At home, Green Bay is laying 13.5. The over-under is 81.5. On the money line, San Antonio is plus 650. And if you like Green Bay to win outright, that's a whopping minus 1,000 that you're laying. That's basically saying if you bet $10, you are going to win $1 as a result of that. So let's talk about the Gunslingers first. They have had a rough time their past couple games following a 3-game win streak. They've had defeats at the hands of the San Diego Strike Force as well as the Tulsa Oilers. To drop down to 3-5, they still have the inside track for that fourth and final playoff spot in the West. But in order to elevate the team's upside, it's going to come down to whether or not their offense can find that third, fourth gear. Actually read a little nugget from Trey's What We Learned post this week, where San Antonio has not cracked 40 points in any game this season. And they seem to be stuck in that quagmire between Fred Payton Jr. and Joaquin Collazo Jr. at the helm, where one offers you pretty significant upside at spurts, but not enough of a string of consistency to lead that offense to a 40-plus point effort yet. So given where you have guys like Dion Cook, Austin Upshaw, Glenn Gibbons, the talent is there for the Gunslingers to take that next step, but this is going to be a very, very tough matchup to do it. Their defense holds a candle to just about anybody in the league. They are actually the best scoring defense in the IFL at 31.4 points per game entering this week. But again, the matchup against Green Bay at the Resch Center promises to be challenging. Liam Thompson and his gang of Green Bay Blizzard skill position players, they are rested, they are fresh off a bye week, and they are ready to roll for what should be a very, very tight finish for a potential top spot in the Eastern Conference. The Blizzard are a top 5 team in both offense and defense in terms of efficiency, along with point scoring on a per game basis as well. Where we had mentioned some of those players that are working in tandem with Thompson. We've got Demylan Brown, we got Drayshawn Hudson, Trayvon Alexander. All those guys have had outstanding years, have delivered consistent results whenever their number has been called. And on the defensive side, they've got guys like Jaquan Griffin breaking out as a playmaker, Tavon Grant, longtime league veteran with high upside, Frankie West Jr. rising up as one of the more underrated defensive backs in terms of man-to-man coverage in the league. But yeah, this Green Bay team is an absolute unit. They have certainly outperformed many preseason expectations here. There's a reason why they're 7-1. Part of that big reason why they've been so successful is by absolute dominance at home. And those who have followed my work long enough know that I bring it up all the time. Anytime Green Bay's at home, my bread and butter is taking them against the spread. And again, it is a position where I am thrilled that we are getting this number below the key number of 14. That's 2 touchdowns plus 2 PATs. Really what this boils down to, in my opinion, is Green Bay's offense, the way that it's been playing right now, especially at home. Their past 4 games have netted 55, 71, 61, and 51 points, something along those lines. Basically, at least 51 or 52 points in each of their past 4 games against some pretty good defenses to boot. San Antonio might be a good test, but I'm led to believe that Green Bay is showing a level of upside that you could argue is matchup proof. So I have them getting the job done here. My correct score prediction is 51-31, with Green Bay taking this one by a 20-point margin, and their defense making life tricky and potentially forcing multiple takeaways against that San Antonio offense. So we'll lead things off with the pick that I say is my bread and butter, but we'll see if it rings true here again. Green Bay covering at home. All right, we've got 4 games on Saturday, starting out with a 6 o'clock Eastern showdown between the Iowa Barnstormers and the Tulsa Oilers. Back at home, the Oilers are laying 19.5. The over-under is 84.5. The money line is available with Iowa at plus 1,200 there, and the Oilers at minus 2,400. The Barnstormers, for all intents and purposes, you could argue that they did have their best game that ended up in a loss of the season last week against Jacksonville. They seem to have found something really, really good with Clifton McDowell as the quarterback. He led Iowa to a season-high 48 points in that defeat, where, let's be honest, Iowa may have had a shot had their defense strung together maybe a stop or two somewhere along the way prior to their interception that they had near the end of the game. But with McDowell at quarterback, David Elder at running back, and the receivers showing some life as well with Donald McKinney and Curtis Ravenel headlining that effort, the pieces seem to be in place right now for Iowa to, at the very least, make life challenging for perhaps unsuspecting opposition. That defense, we're going to have to see if they're able to keep teams out of the end zone on a consistent basis. They've got some pretty decent players back there that should be able to accomplish that, with John Adams Jr. in the secondary, along with Tyler Tate and Austin Edmonds along that front line. So for Coach Andre Coles, that objective through the rest of the season is going to be about building that positive momentum, putting players in position to succeed, as has been the case with the players mentioned. For Tulsa, they'll, believe it or not, actually be gunning for their first in-conference Eastern Conference win. They are 0-4 in the conference entering this one. Prime opportunity to finally get that one win in the win column from that win-loss lens. And we saw them do a lot of good in their game against San Antonio last week. The defense showed up strong in the first. The offense was pretty consistently putting up points. Not a perfect game on that side of the ball, but when you're playing the Gunslingers these days, it doesn't seem like you necessarily need your A-plus game in that respect. So the Oilers are going to look to put together a winning streak for what I believe will be the first time this season. And Iowa's trying to play spoiler and get that second win, which would actually be their first win away from Des Moines since the 2024 season. So in terms of my pick for this game, I've got the over. Here, I've got the over at 84.5. And I'm not going to say that I'm necessarily sold on the idea of a Clifton McDowell-led offense yet, but I did like the eye test from what I saw in their game against the Sharks. Clifton McDowell is going to have to prove what the couple other Barnstormers quarterbacks in front of him failed to do. You look at Ivan Corbin, who had that 5-touchdown rushing game. You look at Dante Avila Santos, who led Iowa to their only win at this point in the season. Those following games were not particularly good for either guy. So with McDowell going up against his former team, whom he's started the season with, we can expect McDowell to be extra motivated and try to put some more points on the board. As for the Oilers, I have no doubt in my mind that they'll be able to carry most of this. The Barnstormers actually give up 50 points per 10 possessions. If you assume that the Oilers can actually make that 50-point mark, you're just looking for 5 touchdowns from the Barnstormers. The only other thing to consider a little bit here is the issues that Iowa's had at the kicker spot. They gave that guy Feder a start last week. Didn't seem to do a whole lot there, so we'll have to see if the Barnstormers maybe bring in somebody else to try the kicks, or if they may be more lenient on going for 2 for their point after attempts after touchdowns. But I do still like this play. If we're leaning at all towards one play over the other here, Cody chiming in and saying that game is a no play. That's certainly fair enough. It was definitely one of my tougher calls as well. But the way that I see it, I took the under in a hashtag revenge game involving the Iowa Barnstormers last week. And at a lower number, I'm not making that same mistake. So I'm going to roll with this one. We'll see if it sticks, but give me Iowa and Tulsa with that over at 84.5. Which brings us to our next game. Eastern Conference clash, the Fishers Freight taking on the Jacksonville Sharks. This is a rematch of the game 2 weeks ago in Fishers, with the Sharks won. They come back home, and they are 2.5-point favorites. Notice the slight difference in odds there, with Jacksonville at longer odds than Fishers at plus 2.5. The over-under is set at the largest of the week at 93.5. On the money line, we've got that is Fishers at plus 130 and Jacksonville minus 155. Grab a swig of water real quick. But I am very much looking forward to see how this game pans out. If their first meeting was any indication, expect to see a ton of fireworks early and often. These two teams are number 1 and number 2 right now in per 10 possession offensive efficiency, with Jacksonville at 53.1 and Fishers at 51.1. So I fully expect this to be a big-time heavyweight bout where if the arena football purists get the result that they want, we're pretty much going to be trading touchdown for touchdown until that fourth quarter. But Fishers, they've had some troubles. It's not been in the putting up points standpoint. The rush-heavy attack with Felix Harper, Dominic Roberto, and Josiah King has had no problems punishing teams in that regard. What's been the backbreaker for Fishers during their 3-game losing streak has been a defense that has just been porous in that stretch, giving up 57, 60, and 68 in their last 3 games, with that latter result coming against the same Jacksonville team, which has scored 60-plus in 2 consecutive games. So that defense has good pieces. They've got Jalen Swan, they've got Jaden Rowe, Monty Montgomery. But now is the time for those players to maybe flip the script and come up with some big plays. Rowe among the league leader in interceptions, So we'll see if Fishers can maybe pressure James Cahoon into some throws that he doesn't want to make. Speaking of the Cape Cod Cannon, he has been instrumental in guiding the Sharks offense to where they are today. Getting that running game involved with Jimmy Robinson and backup option Sammy Edwards. And the receivers have balled out. Big plays coming from Marquell Wade, Jaden Stoshak, Red Douglas. No matter who Jacksonville throws at you at any given play, they just seem to overpower whoever's lined up against them. It's been a big reason for their 6-game winning streak. They'll look to make it 7 with the result here. And look for perhaps a little bit of a bounce back effort from the Sharks defense in this one after giving up 48 to Iowa, which was the Barnstormer season high. So we'll have to see if Michael Moore, the linebacker, comes back from his injury that he suffered a couple weeks ago. But along that defense, you've got guys like Chris Rice and Dylan Brown that have really made that Jacksonville defense a top 5 unit in the league. We've got one recommended play here from Cody saying the over for a unit. I am definitely on board with that. I did pivot towards a different play, though, for at least my single game pick. I'm going to go Jacksonville on the spread here. It's not an ultra prohibitive number. It's -2.5. From a betting on a favorite standpoint, we are below the key number of 3. The Sharks took this last meeting by 18 points in a hostile environment. And if you look at their ATS record since the start of last season, you view a team that has been all business in their barn. 8-3 against the spread in their 11 home games dating back to last year. 2 of those ATS losses were on games where the Sharks were double-digit favorites. So maybe tilting the odds maybe a little bit more against them than probably what was warranted. But in any event, the point is Jacksonville is really good right now. It's tough to fade them. The Fishers defense, if they got a bounce back game defensively, it certainly wouldn't surprise me. If they won the game, it probably shouldn't surprise me either. But off a bye week, we're going to have to see how that rest versus rust battle plays out. But for right now, Jacksonville at -2.5 for a nice little small odds boost there compared to our -110 plays. So that's pick number 3. As we make our way to game number 4 of the slate, which renews an in-state rivalry. The Northern Arizona Wranglers taking on the Arizona Rattlers. Biggest spread of the season so far. Stick around for why that's the case. With the Rattlers at 22.5 is the value that they're giving to Northern Arizona. The over-under is 85.5. On the money line, Northern Arizona is plus 1,600 and Arizona -4,000. For the Wranglers, things seem pretty bleak right now. They're at a record of 1-7. They just got their socks beaten off them by San Diego by 32 points. But amidst all of that kind of depressing energy, if you will, this team is still 2 games back from a playoff spot, which is wild to think about. So if you're head coach Ron James, you take your rookie quarterback, Anthony Garrett, you say, hey, you got that road debut out of the way. Let's forget about it. And now let's channel back to what we know how to do and go after this Arizona team that we've had some relatively decent success against in the recent past, especially in the playoffs. It's been a little bit lopsided, but Northern Arizona has had their laugh from time to time in this season series. So we'll see if Garrett can start and finish this one this time around, as he's got an offense surrounded by playmakers all over him. Ben Omayebu has really taken over that running back spot with Nolan Sussel as a good depth option. Receivers are Kobe Smith, Marlon Cook, and Kayron Ashley. So some decent mix of size and athleticism there. For Garrett, it's going to be about minimizing the mistakes. And that's going to be critically important against an Arizona defense that has been very, very good in the big picture this season. Wranglers defense, no slouch either. Aside from last week's demolition, they still come into this season reasonably average on the offensive side, something that you wouldn't typically say about a team with just one win to this point in the season. Arizona, on the other hand, they've got a fascinating question to answer at that quarterback spot now, because they've rode Drew Powell as the starter for the past few weeks now, but we did see those turnover issues that plagued him through his past Arizona tenure flare up, and ultimately it contributed to costing Arizona a chance to lift the IFL Cup on Sunday night. So does the confidence go back to Drew Powell, or do you pivot to your other MVP quarterback in Max Byler to take command of this offense going forward? Regardless of who's there, it's still a very good team, but that ongoing chemistry factor is still going to be a very, very fascinating dynamic as this season moves along here and draws nearer to a close. Again, just like Tulsa, Iowa, or Iowa-Tulsa, this was a very tough game for me to get a pretty good read on, but I am going to take a little bit of a gamble here, and I'm going to stake the under again on a Northern Arizona game. This time it is at 85.5, and believe it or not, a lot of this has to do with a trend that I found about some of Arizona's recent losses, which is whenever Northern Arizona has lost a game within the past year plus, they are actually 5-1 to the under in the immediate succeeding games, with that 6-game stretch actually averaging 77.5 points per game. Northern Arizona actually carries a pretty similar trait as well. Looking back at their games from 2025 and onwards, whenever they have given up 50 or more points in a game, they've responded by going 5-3 to the under in those immediate games. So if you're a believer that the Rattlers can hold down the fort defensively at home, which seems to be a more likely outcome than Northern Arizona's defense doing the same thing to Arizona's offense, this could be a sneakily good play. But given my over-under betting record so far, I could also see this blowing up in my face, as has been the case twice more often than me celebrating cashing a point total bet. But I do like the idea of this one. My final score prediction here is Arizona at 49 and Northern Arizona at 29. And again, I'll get you some correct score predictions for the prior couple games that we looked at as well. Tulsa, Iowa, I have 53-36 favoring the Oilers. And the Sharks and Freight game, I have the Sharks winning 55-47. I knew that I would forget again. I said last week I'd try to make a habit of including those before moving on to the next one, but still have more work to do there. But for Northern Arizona, let's play the under at 85.5 and see what happens. And that will bring us now to our final game of Saturday, kicking off at 9 Eastern. The Orlando Pirates making their second trip in as many years to Tucson to play the Sugar Skulls. As the hosts, the Sugar Skulls are getting 8.5 points from Orlando. The over-under is set at 90.5. The money line payout is Orlando minus 425 and Tucson at plus 330. For Orlando, this game is critical, especially when you look at their next few games on the calendar versus what they have left in June and July. This borders upon being a must-win for them. And, they've had their wins against some bottom-rung opponents, and they've had some losses against top-notch competition. So is fraud watch real, or is it not real? These next 3-4 weeks are going to tell us a lot about Orlando. Offensively, they're still a very high upside team with Paxton DeLaurent at quarterback, Puka Williams, who missed last week's outing as their starting running back, Great receiving trio with Thomas Owens, Nyquan Murray, and Tio Redding. And that defense with a bunch of brand new faces like Deontay Anderson made some big plays against New Mexico last week. Dustin Mack has been there right from the jump. So for Orlando, if they can round out their defense, they'll be in some reasonably solid shape. In fact, this matchup in Tucson actually presents a pretty fascinating development here. With Jerome Johnson having been traded a couple different times, but eventually winding up as a Sugar Skull, he is expected to make his debut as the starting quarterback for this game, with the hopes that he'll elevate an offense that, at this point in the season, has been a bottom 3 unit in terms of scoring and efficiency. He will absorb an offense that does have Brandon Mackey in the conversation now at running back, with some pretty good receivers beside him in Javion Lofton, Mike Kerrigan, and Javion Lofton, highlighting there, along with D'Amico Ewing as a secondary option, along with being the main kick returner for the team. Defensively, Tucson has had their moments, but again, that consistency on and off at times. But they've got some good players there. DeJimon Brooks, Zach Twardowski, Brian Murray. In fact, a lot of those players from Tucson were on the team last year that ended up beating these Pirates in the same exact matchup a season ago. So, fascinating non-conference game. A lot of familiarity there, especially with Rayshawn Kaiser, the Sugar Skulls head coach, who held that same spot with the Pirates in their time in Massachusetts during the 2022 season. So, let's get to my pick for this game. And those who have followed me long enough know that anytime Orlando, this Pirates franchise, is on the road, I immediately get super skeptical, especially when they are favorites on the road. And I got curious. I took a look at some past results. The Pirates have been favored in 16 games as the road team. They've only covered twice. That's it. For those doing the math at home, that's 2 wins and 14 ATS losses as the home favorite. That tells me auto fade. We're going home dog. We're going with the Sugar Skulls at plus 8.5. Now, when Jerome Johnson was on the Chupacabras earlier in the year, their opening game was against the Pirates. They were also underdogs. I believe plus 5.5 was the closing number there. He led the team to a cover with the Chupacabras narrowly defeated by a 3-point margin. I believe he has more than enough talent, what it takes to at least keep this game interesting. That Tucson plus 330 number is also super, super tempting, and to me presents some pretty solid value for those bold enough to go with that. But Orlando on the road. I've talked about Green Bay on the spread being a powerhouse. Orlando has been the same thing on the road. The Pirates have been the same thing on the road, but the exact opposite. And I see Goaties going a little bit on the opposite side as I am here, with Orlando at minus 8.5. It's an interesting choice. I mean, if you're a believer in regression to the mean, then minus 8.5 certainly would be the play for you. But I'm going to trust the historic numbers here. I've got Tucson at plus 8.5. This is my mortal mega max of the week at that minus 112 number. My final score prediction for this game, I do have Orlando winning, but by a narrow margin here. I've got 49-44. This profiles as another game that could very well come down to the final play. And we've seen how Orlando seemingly loves to get themselves in those scenarios this season. Granted, more often than not, they've pulled it out, but it's a very risky business to go about doing. So we'll see if Tucson makes the number as home dogs. Again, that's 14-7 ATS across the league this season. All right. Moseying our way over to the Sunday doubleheader. We will begin things at 4 p.m. with the San Diego Strike Force on the road taking on the New Mexico Chupacabras, who go back to Tingley Coliseum for the first time since April 11th. But amidst their rough form, their 5-game losing streak, they are now 2-touchdown underdogs to the Strike Force, who are laying 13.5. The over-under in this game is 83.5. On the money line, San Diego is minus 900, and New Mexico is plus 600. If you look at San Diego's track record so far, they have impressed a lot. They are 6-2 right now, which is good for second place in the Western Conference. They still have their games coming up against the Vegas Nighthawks later in the season as well. So I suppose the one argument that you could make against San Diego's contender legitimacy is the fact that they have only played one team with a winning record. And that was against Arizona, and they lost by 22 in an early season defeat. So at least for right now, San Diego, all they can do is go after the opponents thrown after them at any given time. And we saw what Nate Davis and Dallas Daniels are capable of in their game last week against Northern Arizona. This team, when they're firing, can put up points in a hurry. With Nate Davis actually leading the league in touchdown passes entering this slate of games. The defense, on the other hand, as opportunistic as always, with guys like Elijah Reed and Roy C. making plays consistently throughout the season. San Diego's defense, a little above league average right now in offense or defensive scoring as well as defensive efficiency. But when teams aren't careful, they can rip off 2, 3, 4 takeaways on you. And that's something that has plagued this New Mexico offense that's trying to find that answer right now between Harry Rubidoux and Donovan Porter-Ray. The former has been substituted for the latter in each of the past 2 contests. Those were both in East Rutherford. And the Chupacabra offense right now, in their 5-game losing streak, they have averaged under 20 points per game. That would be a low mark in the NFL and the outdoor game, let alone for indoor football with the field half the size. So the Chupacabras, they've got pieces. They've got C.J. Jefferson. They've got LaJames White, who has had a pretty solid season at the running back spot. The question for New Mexico is going to be, can they consistently gain yards on plays and kind of build things up from that point onward? The return home should help them out, but exactly by how much is going to be the question. Along with the question of, can the New Mexico defense with guys like Gleason Spliruel and Greg Dent and Maurice Jackson force the issue on a San Diego team that may have a little bit of a different gear on the road versus at home? So my pick for this game, and I'm going to have Cody give it away here a little bit. We're in lockstep with this one, bud. San Diego at minus 13.5. This just goes beyond the sample of results that we've seen recently, right? San Diego, for a long time now, has been one of the premier teams, if not the premier team, at covering spreads on the road. And I view this matchup as no different, especially if you look at New Mexico's offense and say, hey, is this team even going to put up 24 points? If you believe the answer to that is no, then all you need San Diego to do is put up something in the low 40s, mid 40s, and you should cover with relative ease. So again, New Mexico hasn't played a home game in a while, so we're going to have to see how that dynamic kind of factors into this. But when you have a team on a roll like San Diego is right now, they've won, I believe, 3 straight or 2 straight. I believe it's actually 2 straight games. But in any event, still, 6 wins in their last 7 games. Hard to fade that form in any capacity. So we'll squad ride this one out, Cody. You've got the full unit play, as do I. I'm actually going to go 1.1 units for this one by the letter of my law over on my written piece. So on the road, San Diego by 2 touchdowns. Again, we're getting it below that key number of 14, which is lovely. And to wrap up our single game picks here, we've got the Quad City Steamwheelers and the Vegas Nighthawks. Now, this is the largest spread in the IFL this season. Quad City, fresh off a bye, given 23.5 against the reigning champions who are on a 7-game win streak. The over-under is 87.5. On the money line, Quad City is plus 1,700 and Vegas minus 4,500. For the Steamwheelers, you could argue this is pretty much it right here. Like, the opponent is as tough as it's going to get. But you're still sitting at 3-6 right now. You're 2 games behind a playoff spot in your conference. The time to bank wins has to be now. If Quad City is going to play their way back into this conversation, it's going to take veterans like Daquan Neal, Keon Williams, Keyshawn Moore, Trey Smith, Nick Harris to give that extra edge. And a big part of that in the case of Quad City's offense is going to be limiting the turnovers, which has been a problem. In fact, the Steamwheelers have turned the ball over multiple times in each of their last 4 games. They got away with it 2 weeks ago in their win against Tucson, which snapped a 4-game losing streak. But those aren't habits that you want continuing in a premier matchup like this. Vegas, we've seen a little bit of vulnerability in them during their 2-game Jersey road trip. They actually fell behind in both games by double digits, but they came back nicely and won those games. Won convincingly against Orlando by 40 points and won against Arizona that clinched them the IFL Cup, where they turned around a 14-point deficit and ended up winning by 4. You look up and down this Nighthawk roster and this coaching staff, how can you not be impressed? Jaden DeLara, one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the game. Quentin Randolph, arguable IFL wide receiver 1. Josh Tomas, from a skill standpoint, maybe the best running back in the game, especially with his ability as a pass catcher and a kick returner. Defensively, they've got absolute grit up front. Guys like Lorenzo Hernandez, Clifton Duck in the secondary, Joe Fouché, who was the reigning defensive player of the year last year for the Bay Area Panthers. He was signed on a few weeks ago. The rich just seem to get richer in Sin City. This is going to be probably one of my favorite games to watch. And Cody's along the same line of thinking that I am here. Like, the numbers themselves tell us this makes a little bit of sense. Like, Vegas has been maybe the best team offensively and defensively in the circuit, whereas Quad City is kind of hovering around that bottom 5. So if you sit down and think about it long enough, you can probably state a case. I mean, there's a good reason why it's set at this number. But I'm totally with you here. Like, given Quad City's situation right now and the skill that they do have, plus 23.5 is the number that I'm going to have to go with here. I realize that I am directly fading Vegas's 7-game cover streak and the fact that they have covered in 16 of their last 19 games, an unheard of run. But there does have to be a time when something strange like this happens, and you've got to make that judgment call. That's precisely what I'm doing right here. We saw last week with Iowa Jacksonville that anytime a team that is set as underdogs of 3 or more touchdowns, it proves to be too much more often than not. In fact, underdogs of 21.5 or more, 5-1 ATS all time in the IFL betting era. We actually have another game like this playing out with the Northern Arizona game that we mentioned. But yeah, like if you're going with Quad City here, all you're asking them to do is to take care of the ball and score touchdowns, or at the very least points, on the majority of their possessions. So if they're able to do that, you're looking at a game where I see the final score of this one, Vegas 56 and Quad City 38. It is probably going to be at least a 2-touchdown margin of victory. But as long as we're within that 24-point number, we are good. And remember, too, with the IFL's ending in-game timing rules at the 1-minute mark of the fourth quarter, if Vegas is up by 17 and they have the ball, in every shred of likelihood, they're not going to push. They're just going to take victory formation. So that's something to bear in mind as well, with the way that the rules of the game kind of shape this bet. So we'll wrap up the week with an underdog spread bet, one of the largest that we'll probably ever bet on. Quad City at plus 23.5 in a bid to bring Vegas' 7-game cover streak to a close. And Cody asking, where do you get your betting stats? I'll be honest with you, man, this is self-tracked. I started this series when betting legalized on the IFL in 2023. And so the sheet that I've got has basically every result of every game. Who won, who covered, who made the over, did the road team cover, did the home team cover. It is basically an entire encyclopedia that I have. It's very nerdy, I will be honest, but you know, it turns out some fascinating stats. And part of the research, part of the fun is the research involved in asking those questions, right? It's, you know, hey, this team is coming off this specific result. Where they've had this before, is there anything that's like stupidly one-sided? I followed social media long enough to where there's always some crazy streak out there, like the Detroit Lions waxing gibbous in Thanksgiving one is one of the more over-the-top examples, but you kind of get the point that I'm trying to make. All righty. We are actually past an hour of stream time here, so I will make things relatively quick with my 3-leg parlay attempt of the week. I'm going to start things off with the Fishers Jacksonville contest. And Cody, you and I had talked about this one a little bit, but I've got the over to kick this thing off. And at the end of the day, this boils down to both teams' incredible offensive upsides. They're right around the top 2 in offensive efficiency, top 4 in offensive point scoring per game. And there is a precedent where this number hits with these. 2 weeks ago, we got 118 out of these two teams. If you're looking for a bit of a special teams edge as well, Callum Sutherland and Mark Orozco are 2 of the very best kickers in the game when it comes to booting through deuces. So you get, 2, 3 of those. That's basically the equivalent of a touchdown right there and then. So we'll look for repeat history with Fishers and Jacksonville, again, going over their total. In the San Diego, New Mexico game, I am going with the under at 83.5. And this basically comes down to, until we see some change in the way that New Mexico runs their offense and the way that they're able to execute, you're kind of hand-tied into taking this bet. I mean, with the drop-off that offense has had, each of the past 5 Chupacabra games have made the under. It's a perfect antithesis to San Diego's 6-2 over-under record. And while we saw the strike force completely throw this out of whack last week, I don't think there's going to be a need for them to push to 67 again. They certainly can score it if New Mexico surrenders it to them. But again, I have this one more of like a 54-28 style of game, where if New Mexico can't even get out of the teens, it's going to take San Diego 60 plus just to push this into 80. So we will make that leg number 2. And leg number 3, once again, we are right on top of this, Cody. Quad City Vegas Let's take the over on this one at 87.5. And again, with this one, the math checks out. Vegas scores about 50 points per 10 possessions. Quad City scores about 39 points per 10 possessions. You get even a below average tempo game with 20 total possessions. We should expect to see a number in the high 80s and low 90s. And that's even before factoring in that these teams play at top 5 tempo levels in terms of possession count on a per game basis. So we could easily get a scenario where both teams get 11 or even 12 possessions, which really increases our chances of this pick even more. Vegas's games, outside of their opening night defeat against the Green Bay Blizzard, they've scored at least 92 in 6 of those 7 games, with the one that didn't was against the aforementioned New Mexico offense as part of that extended drought. So that's what I have for this parlay. It is 3 over-under picks, which is a little bit scary if you look at recent results, but I feel strong enough about these 3 in particular to stick with it and hope for that all-important regression to the mean. For those who want to put a 10 spot on this, it would return $69.57. It is 3 minus 110 propositions on the table here. So we'll go over it one more time if you want to follow along. Start things off on one game Saturday with Fishers and Jacksonville over 93.5. San Diego against New Mexico under 83.5 on the top end of Sunday's doubleheader. And then the back end of it, Quad City and Vegas making it over 87.5 in our bid for the first ever back-to-back parlay win in Wager Wednesday series history. All right, so that is going to draw this week's episode to a close. I want to thank you all again for tuning in. Cody, it was great to chat with you here. I know we've chopped it up a little bit on socials, but another great atmosphere here as well. So hope everybody enjoys their upcoming weekend ahead. We've just got a couple more days to go to get there. If you're going to be placing some wagers on the IFL this week, I wish you the very best of luck. And as always, I will see you at the cashier. Have a great night, folks.